20-year-old Serena Whitmore stood in a rose garden overlooking San Francisco Bay, wearing white silk and realizing she'd been sold. Her father had traded her to a crime lord to erase his debts, a man she'd met once, whose eyes had stripped her bare in 12 silent minutes. Marco DeLuca was 40, ruthless, and owned half the city's shadows. In 2 hours, he would claim her in front of everyone who mattered. But what terrified her most wasn't the deal. It was the way her pulse had quickened when he'd smiled at her like she was the only dangerous thing in the room. If you're drawn into stories of power, transformation, and love forged in fire, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Serena's story reaches across the world. The evening sun painted the garden in shades of amber and blood. Serena stood beneath an arch wound with white roses, their perfume thick enough to choke on, and tried to remember how to breathe. Guests circulated through the manicured grounds of the Fairmont Hotel's private terrace, San Francisco's elite, draped in designer labels and false smiles, champagne flutes catching the dying light. They were here for a spectacle, an engagement party, her engagement party. Except Serena hadn't known she was engaged until 3 days ago. She pressed her palms against the ivory silk of her dress, a gown her mother had chosen without asking her opinion, and watched her father work the crowd. Harold Whitmore moved with the desperate energy of a drowning man, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, his face slick with sweat despite the cool breeze rolling off the bay. He'd been a city councilman once, respected, powerful. Now he was something else entirely. A man who'd gambled with money that wasn't his, made promises to people who collected debts in blood, and finally run out of places to hide. So he'd sold his daughter instead. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." Her mother appeared at her elbow, diamond bracelet catching the light. Patricia Whitmore's smile was fragile as spun glass. "Just remember to smile. Everyone's watching." "That's the problem," Serena murmured. "Serena." Her mother's fingers tightened on her arm, nails pressing through silk. "This is for the family. Your father made his own choices." Serena pulled away gently but firmly. "I'm just paying for them." Patricia's face crumpled, but she recovered quickly, smoothing her expression into practiced neutrality. "He'll be here soon. Marco, your father says he's very generous. Once you're married, everything will be fine. The house, your brother's school, everything." The unspoken hung between them. "Your sacrifice will save us all." Serena turned back to the garden, bile rising in her throat. She was 20 years old, a sophomore at Stanford, studying international relations, fluent in 3 languages, with dreams of working abroad. She'd had plans, a future. And then her father's world had collapsed like a house of cards, taking hers with it. 3 days ago, he'd sat her down in his study, the one he was about to lose, and explained it with all the warmth of a business transaction. The debts were catastrophic. The people he owed weren't the type to accept payment plans. But there was a solution. Marco DeLuca, one of the most powerful men in San Francisco's underworld, had made an offer. Marriage to Serena in exchange for the debt's erasure. Complete financial protection for the family. A fresh start. "He saw you at the mayor's gala last month," her father had said, unable to meet her eyes. "He asked about you. This is an opportunity, Serena, for all of us." She'd been too shocked to scream, too numb to cry. She'd simply asked the only question that mattered, "What if I say no?" Harold's silence had been answer enough. They were already past the point of choices. Now she stood in a garden full of strangers, wearing a dress that cost more than her tuition, waiting for a man she'd met exactly once. The memory burned clear as yesterday. The mayor's charity gala. She'd attended with her parents, bored and restless in a black cocktail dress, counting down the minutes until she could escape back to campus. She'd been standing near the bar when she'd felt it, that prickle of awareness that told her she was being watched. She'd turned, and there he was, Marco DeLuca. She'd known who he was immediately. Everyone did. Not because he sought attention, but because power radiated from him like heat from a furnace. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than her father's car. Dark hair silvered at the temples. A face carved in hard angles, handsome in a way that made her think of Roman emperors and Renaissance paintings, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. But it was his eyes that had stopped her breath. Dark, intelligent, absolutely focused. He'd looked at her like she was the equation he intended to solve, a puzzle he'd already decided to possess. He'd crossed the room in 6 strides, extended his hand. Serena Whitmore. Not a question. He'd known her name. She'd shaken his hand because refusing would have been rude and because some traitorous part of her had wanted to touch him. His grip had been firm, warm, entirely controlled. Mr. DeLuca? Marco. His voice had been low, textured like aged whiskey. You're studying at Stanford. International relations. Her chin had lifted defensively. How did you know? I make it my business to know things. He'd held her gaze, and she'd felt stripped bare, every secret and insecurity exposed under that dark stare. You're wasting your time there. Anger had flared hot in her chest. Excuse me? The theories they teach you, diplomacy, negotiation, soft power. The corner of his mouth had curved, not quite a smile. They're pretty lies. Real power doesn't come from consensus, Miss Whitmore. It comes from knowing exactly what people want, what they fear, and being willing to use both without hesitation. She should have walked away. Instead, she'd stepped closer, voice dropping. And you're an expert on power? I'm an expert on survival. Something had flickered in his eyes, there and gone, which requires understanding that the world isn't fair, justice is a fairy tale, and the only person you can rely on is yourself. Your professors won't teach you that. Maybe because it's a cynical way to live. Cynical. He'd considered the word, still holding her hand, thumb brushing once across her knuckles in a gesture that had sent electricity down her spine. Or honest. Time will teach you the difference. Before she could respond, her father had appeared, face pale, stammering introductions. Marco had released her hand, turned his attention to Harold Whitmore with the kind of dismissive courtesy that made her father shrink. The conversation had lasted another minute, pleasantries that felt like landmines, and then Marco had excused himself. But before he'd left, he'd looked at her one last time. It was a pleasure, Miss Whitmore. I suspect we'll see each other again. 12 minutes. That's all it had been. 12 minutes of conversation that had left her shaken and furious and uncomfortably aware of her own heartbeat. She hadn't known then that she'd already been chosen, that in those 12 minutes, Marco DeLuca had decided she was worth acquiring. Now, 2 months later, she was standing in a garden waiting to be claimed. He's here. The whisper rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Heads turned, conversations faltered. Serena's heart kicked against her ribs as she followed the collective gaze toward the garden's entrance. Marco DeLuca walked through the gate like he owned the world. He was late, fashionably, deliberately late, and he didn't apologize for it. The crowd parted automatically, creating a path. He moved with the fluid confidence of a predator, black suit perfectly tailored, no tie, top button undone. 2 men flanked him, security, unmistakably, but they hung back as he approached. His eyes found her immediately. Serena forced herself to stand still, to meet his gaze even as every instinct screamed at her to run. He looked exactly as she remembered, powerful, controlled, dangerous. But there was something new in his expression now, a possessiveness that made her skin flush hot and cold. He stopped 3 feet away. The garden had gone silent. Serena, her name in his mouth sounded like ownership. You look extraordinary. You're late. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. His smile was slight, knowing. I had business to attend to. Shall I apologize to you or to them? A dismissive gesture toward the watching crowd. Neither. She lifted her chin. Let's just get this over with. Something flashed in his eyes. Approval? Amusement? Direct. I appreciate that. He stepped closer, and she caught his scent. Expensive cologne and something underneath. Something warm and male that made her stomach tighten. Your father promised you'd be compliant. I'm pleased to see he was wrong. I'm not a dog to be trained. No. His hand rose and she flinched before she could stop herself. He paused, something softening in his expression, then continued the motion slowly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with surprising gentleness. You're a woman who's been backed into a corner through no fault of her own, and you're angry about it. That's good. Anger is useful. It means you haven't given up yet. His touch lingered, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Every eye in the garden was on them. What are you doing? She whispered. What's expected? His hand slid to cup her jaw, tilting her face up. They need to see that you're mine, that this is real. So I'm going to kiss you now, Serena. You can slap me afterward if it makes you feel better." She didn't have time to respond. He lowered his head and captured her mouth with his. The kiss was nothing like she'd expected. Not brutal or demanding, but thorough, consuming, a claiming that left no room for doubt. His lips moved over hers with practiced skill, coaxing rather than forcing, and her body, traitorous, foolish, responded. Heat bloomed in her chest, spreading outward. Her hands came up instinctively, pressed against his chest, and she felt his heart beating steady and sure under her palms. He kissed her like he had all the time in the world, like they weren't surrounded by witnesses, like this was real. When he finally pulled back, she was breathless, dizzy, furious at herself for the small sound of protest that had escaped her throat. The crowd erupted in polite applause. Marco's eyes searched hers, dark and unreadable. Then he leaned in, lips brushing her ear, voice too low for anyone else to hear. "I promise you 3 things, Serena Whitmore. You will be protected, you will never be bored, and you will never, ever be treated like property in my house." He straightened, offering his arm. "Shall we greet our guests?" She stared at him, mind reeling. Then, because she had no other choice, and because some reckless part of her wanted to know what he meant, she placed her hand on his arm. His smile was sharp as a blade. "Good girl." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and champagne toasts. Marco never left her side, his hand a constant presence at the small of her back, warm even through the silk. He introduced her to men with kind faces and killer eyes, to women dripping in diamonds and secrets. He navigated the social waters with effortless skill, charming and dangerous in equal measure, and he never once made her feel small. When a business associate made a veiled comment about Harold's past indiscretions, Marco's expression had gone cold enough to frost glass. "Mr. Whitmore's past is irrelevant to me. What interests me is the future. My future. With Serena." The temperature in the conversation had dropped 20 degrees. The man had excused himself quickly. When an older woman had asked Serena about her sudden engagement with barely concealed judgment, Marco had answered for her. "Sudden? I saw her 2 months ago and knew immediately. Why waste time on courtship when you found what you're looking for? Or are you suggesting I'm not worthy of her?" The woman had backpedaled so fast she'd nearly tripped. By the time the sun had fully set and the garden lights twinkled like captured stars, Serena's head was spinning. Marco had defended her, protected her, presented them as a united front. It was all performance, she told herself. Theater for the watching crowd. But when his thumb stroked absent circles against her spine, she wasn't sure anymore. "Walk with me," he said quietly, when the party had reached its peak and the guests were too drunk on champagne to notice their absence. She should have refused. Instead, she let him guide her away from the crowd, down a path lined with rose bushes toward a quieter corner of the garden. The music and laughter faded behind them until they were alone beneath the stars. The bay spread out below like black glass scattered with lights. Marco released her, moving to stand at the stone railing, hands in his pockets. For a long moment he simply looked out at the water and Serena studied him. The strong line of his shoulders, the silver threading through his dark hair, the way he held himself like violence was always an option, but never a necessity. "You can speak freely now," he said without turning. "No audience. Just us." How generous. The bitterness leaked through despite her best efforts. 20 minutes of privacy before you drag me back to the auction block. Now he did turn, and his expression was unreadable. "Is that what you think this is? An auction? Isn't it?" She crossed her arms. "My father owed you money. You wanted me. A transaction was made. I don't remember being consulted about the price." "No," Marco agreed. "You weren't. And if I could have arranged this differently, I would have. But your father's debts aren't financial, Serena. They're terminal. The people he owes don't accept payment plans. They accept blood." Ice slid down her spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if I hadn't intervened, you'd be burying your father within a month. And your mother and brother would be next, because that's how these things work. You eliminate the entire line to send a message." The garden tilted. She reached for the railing, fingers gripping stone. "That's not... He said it was money. He lied." Marco's voice was flat, matter-of-fact, or didn't understand the gravity of his situation, which amounts to the same thing. Your father borrowed from the wrong people, made promises he couldn't keep, and tried to run when the bill came due. By the time I heard about it, he was 3 weeks away from disappearing, permanently. And you just happened to know about this? Her voice shook. Convenient. I know about everything that happens in this city. He stepped closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. It's my business to know. And when I learned that Harold Whitmore was about to get his entire family killed over his own stupidity, I made a decision. To save us? The laugh that escaped her was jagged. How noble. To acquire you, he corrected, and the honesty of it stole her breath. I wanted you from the moment I saw you, Serena. Smart, defiant, wasted on that campus learning theories that would never save you. Your father's situation presented an opportunity. So yes, I made a deal. Your hand in marriage in exchange for his debts, all of them, and the guarantee that no one touches your family, ever. She stared at him, torn between fury and horror and a terrible creeping understanding. You bought me. I bought your father's life and your mother's and your brother's. His eyes held hers, unflinching. You're the price I paid for it, but here's what your father didn't tell you, and what I'm going to make very clear right now. I don't own you. I never will. What I own is the shield between your family and the people who want them dead. What I'm offering you is a choice. Some choice, she whispered. Marry you or watch my family die? No. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded document, and handed it to her. Marry me and receive full legal protection, financial independence, and the freedom to leave if I ever break my word. It's all in there. Prenuptial agreement, trust fund in your name only, divorce clause that triggers if I harm you in any way. You want your family safe? Sign. You want your freedom guaranteed? Sign. You want the power to destroy me if I step out of line? It's in the contract. She unfolded the papers with shaking hands, scanned the dense legal text. It was exactly what he'd described. Protections, guarantees, exit clauses. A marriage contract that read more like a business partnership, one weighted heavily in her favor. I don't understand. She looked up at him. Why would you give me this much power over you? Because I don't want a prisoner. His voice was quiet, intense. I want a partner. Someone strong enough to stand beside me, smart enough to challenge me, brave enough not to break. Your father tried to sell you like livestock. I'm offering you a choice. Marry me, and I'll teach you everything I know about real power. Not the sanitized version they feed you in classrooms, but the truth of how the world actually works. You'll be protected, educated, and free to leave if you decide I'm not worth the risk. And if I refuse? Then I'll still clear your father's debts, and you'll go back to Stanford, finish your degree, and live your life. He paused. But your family will still be in danger, because I can't protect them without the marriage. The people your father owes need to see him aligned with someone they fear more than they hate him. Without that shield, they'll come eventually. The trap closed with perfect precision, refuse and doom her family, accept and bind herself to a man who dealt in violence and called it business. But he'd given her weapons, protections, a way out if she needed it. This is insane, she whispered. Yes. He didn't smile. But insanity is better than death, and much more interesting than the life you were planning. She looked down at the contract again, mind racing. Trust fund, legal protections, divorce clause. He was offering her safety and teaching in exchange for her name, her presence, her... what? Her body? The contract didn't mention consummation or heirs. It was almost clinical in its boundaries. What do you get out of this? She asked. Really? You. Simple. Direct. Smart, beautiful, and angry enough to survive in my world. Someone I can talk to without pretending. Someone who might actually understand what it means to make impossible choices. He tilted his head. And someone who might choose to stay eventually, not because I forced you, but because you decided I was worth the risk. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was madness. He was offering her a devil's bargain, wrapped in legal protections and pretty words. But he'd been honest. Brutally, shockingly honest. And the alternative was watching her family die. I need a pen, she heard herself say. Marco pulled one from his jacket, handed it over. Their fingers brushed, and she felt that spark again. Awareness, electricity, danger. She signed her name at the bottom of the contract. Her hand didn't shake. Smart girl, Marco said softly, taking the document back. Now we can be honest with each other. I'm doing this for my family, she said, voice hard. Not for you. I know. He folded the contract, tucked it away. But that's enough. For now. He offered his arm again. Shall we return to the party? They'll be expecting us to set a date. When? The word came out steadier than she felt. 6 weeks. That's how long it'll take to arrange everything properly. Security, legal documentation, the wedding itself. His eyes searched hers. Unless you want more time. To change my mind? She almost laughed. No, 6 weeks is fine. Let's get this over with. As you wish. He led her back toward the light and music, and she tried not to think about how natural his hand felt at her spine. One more thing, Serena. What? Tomorrow morning, a car will take you to a private attorney. She'll explain every clause in that contract, answer any questions you have, and ensure you understand exactly what you've signed. You'll have her contact information. If I ever violate our agreement, she'll represent you in the divorce proceedings. He glanced at her. I meant what I said about not wanting a prisoner, so I'm giving you the key to the cage. She studied his profile, the strong jaw, the controlled expression, the power that radiated from him like gravity. Why are you doing this? Because I've spent 20 years taking what I want by force. I'm curious to see what happens when I try a different approach. He smiled then, and it was sharp and real. And because you're worth the gamble, Serena Whitmore. You just don't know it yet. They rejoined the party, and the celebration swirled around them. Her father approached, face flushed with relief and champagne, trying to embrace her. She stepped back. We need to talk, she said coldly. Tomorrow. Alone. Harold's smile faltered. Serena, sweetheart. Tomorrow, she repeated, and walked away before he could respond. Marco's hand remained at her back, steady and sure. When the party finally ended and the guests departed in a flurry of air kisses and false congratulations, Marco walked her to where her parents waited by their car. Patricia looked exhausted, Harold anxious. They both straightened when Marco approached. Mrs. Whitmore. Harold. Marco's voice was cordial, empty. Thank you for hosting such a lovely evening. Of course, of course. Harold's laugh was too loud. Anything for our Serena. She's exhausted, Marco interrupted smoothly, and has endured enough performance for one night. He turned to Serena, voice softening. The car will pick you up at 9 tomorrow. After you meet with the attorney, I'd like you to join me for lunch. We should discuss the wedding arrangements. It wasn't a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. Fine, Serena said. 9 o'clock. He lifted her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Proper, controlled, devastatingly intimate. Sleep well, Serena. Tomorrow, we begin again. Then he was gone, striding toward a black town car where his security waited. He didn't look back. Serena watched him disappear into the night, her hand still warm where his lips had touched her skin. Isn't he wonderful? Her mother breathed. So distinguished, so powerful. You're very lucky, darling. Lucky. As if she'd won a prize instead of signed away her freedom. But as they drove home through San Francisco's glittering streets, Serena touched the place where Marco had kissed her hand and thought about the contract in his pocket, the protections, the escape clauses, the brutal honesty about what he wanted and why. He'd given her a choice, not a good choice, not a fair choice, but a choice nonetheless. And tomorrow she would start learning whether Marco DeLuca was a monster who lied beautifully or something far more dangerous. A monster who told the truth. The black town car arrived at 8:55 the next morning, idling in front of the Whitmore house like a sleek predator. Serena watched it from her bedroom window, coffee cup trembling slightly in her hands. She hadn't slept. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she'd felt Marco's mouth on hers, heard his voice promising protection and freedom in the same breath, seen the contract that had turned her life into something she barely recognized. Her mother knocked softly. Serena, the car is here. I know. She set down the cup, checked her reflection one last time. Simple black dress, hair pulled back, minimal makeup, armor disguised as elegance. I'm ready. Patricia hovered in the doorway, wringing her hands. Your father wanted to talk to you before you left. No. Serena picked up her purse, brushed past her mother. Tell him I'll see him later, after I understand exactly what he sold me into. Serena, please, he did what he had to do, for the family. She stopped on the stairs, turned back. Her mother looked small, fragile, older than her 52 years. Did he tell you the truth? About who he owed money to? What they would have done to us? Patricia's silence was answer enough. Marco did, Serena said quietly. Last night, He told me everything Dad was too scared to say. So forgive me if I'm not interested in Dad's explanations right now. She left before her mother could respond, before the guilt could take root. The driver, a silent man with kind eyes and the build of a boxer, opened the door for her. She slid into the leather interior, and the car pulled away from the only home she'd ever known. They drove through the city, morning traffic thick and slow, until they reached a sleek high-rise in the financial district. The driver escorted her to the 32nd floor, where glass doors announced Chen and Associates, attorneys at law. A woman waited in the lobby, late 40s, sharp suit, intelligent eyes behind frameless glasses. She extended her hand with a warm smile. Miss Whitmore, I'm Linda Chen. Mr. DeLuca asked me to review the prenuptial agreement with you. Her grip was firm, professional. Everything we discussed today is confidential. Attorney-client privilege. I represent you, not him. Shall we? Serena followed her into a corner office with views of the bay. Linda gestured to a chair, settled behind her desk, and pulled out a copy of the contract. First, Linda said, I want you to understand my role here. Marco DeLuca is paying my retainer, but my obligation is to you. If I believe this contract is unfair or dangerous, I will tell you. If you want to negotiate different terms, I'll represent you in those negotiations. My job is to protect your interests, not his. Clear? Very. Serena leaned forward. Then tell me the truth. Is this contract legitimate, or is it theater to make me feel safe? Linda's smile was approving. Smart question. Let me walk you through it. For the next hour, they dissected every clause. The trust fund, $5 million, deposited in Serena's name only, accessible immediately upon marriage. The property clause, she would have full ownership of a penthouse apartment in Pacific Heights, separate from Marco's assets. The divorce trigger, any act of physical violence, coercion, or violation of her autonomy would void the marriage and entitle her to an additional settlement of $20 million. This is airtight, Linda said, tapping the document. I've reviewed hundreds of prenups in my career. This is the most favorable I've ever seen for the less wealthy party. He's essentially giving you complete financial independence and a nuclear option if he steps out of line. Well, why would he do that? Serena asked. What's the catch? I don't know. Linda set down her pen, studied her carefully. I've worked with Marco DeLuca for 15 years. He's ruthless, calculating, and extremely intelligent. He doesn't make mistakes, and he doesn't give away leverage. Which means either he's playing a game I don't understand, or... She paused. Or what? Or he actually means what he told you, that he wants a partner, not a possession. Linda's expression was unreadable. I'm a divorce attorney, Miss Whitmore. I've seen every variation of terrible marriage. This contract doesn't read like control. It reads like someone trying very hard not to be his father. The words hung in the air, strange and unsettling. You know about his father? Serena asked quietly. Everyone in certain circles knows about Vincent DeLuca. Linda's voice was carefully neutral. He built an empire through fear and violence. Marco inherited that empire and transformed it into something different. Still dangerous, still powerful, but more surgical. More controlled. She leaned back. Whether that makes him better or just more effective is a matter of perspective. Serena looked down at the contract, mind racing. If I sign this, when I sign this, what happens next? You become one of the most protected women in San Francisco, and one of the most watched. Linda's gaze was direct. Marco's enemies will see you as a weakness to exploit. His allies will test whether you're worth his investment. You'll live in a fishbowl made of bulletproof glass. And if I want out, if I use the divorce clause, then you walk away wealthy, legally protected, and very carefully monitored for the rest of your life. Because you'll know things, Miss Whitmore. Secrets. The kind that get people killed. Linda tapped the contract. This guarantees your safety if you leave, but it doesn't guarantee anonymity. You'll always be Marco DeLuca's ex-wife. That's a label that comes with complications. Serena absorbed this, weighing the impossible mathematics of her situation. Marry him and enter a world of danger and power. Refuse and watch her family die. There were no good options, only different kinds of survival. I need to use your phone, she said suddenly. Private call. Linda slid her cell across the desk without hesitation, then stepped out of the office. Serena dialed her brother's number. He answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. Hello? Jamie, it's me. Serena? Confusion cleared to concern. What's wrong? Mom said you got engaged, but that doesn't make sense. It's real. She cut him off gently. I'm marrying Marco DeLuca in 6 weeks. Silence. Then, the Marco DeLuca? The guy who… Jesus, Serena, what the hell is going on? Dad made mistakes, bad ones. This is how we fix them. She kept her voice steady. I need you to promise me something. You're going to finish high school. You're going to college. You're going to live your life and not feel guilty about any of this. Understand? I don't understand any of it. His voice cracked, and she remembered he was only 16, still young enough to believe the world was fair. You can't just marry some gangster because Dad screwed up. I can. I am. She closed her eyes. And I need you to trust that I'm making the best choice I can with the options I have. Can you do that for me? Another pause. Are you safe? Will he hurt you? No. The certainty surprised her. I don't think he will, but if he does, I have ways to protect myself. Legal ways. I'm not helpless, Jamie. You're my sister, he said fiercely. If he touches you, he won't, and you're going to stay out of this, stay in school, and let me handle it. Promise me. Serena? Promise. Fine. I promise. He exhaled shakily, but I'm one phone call away. You need anything, you call me. I don't care who he is. Love squeezed her chest. I know, thank you. She swallowed hard. I have to go. I love you. Love you too. Be careful. She ended the call, wiped her eyes quickly, and stood. Linda returned a moment later. Everything all right? As much as it can be. Serena squared her shoulders. The contract is acceptable. What do I need to sign? Linda's smile was small, sad, understanding. Nothing yet. This meeting was just informational. You've already signed the agreement at the engagement party, but you have my card now. Call me anytime, day or night. I meant what I said. I represent you. They shook hands again, and Serena left the office feeling strange. Lighter, maybe, or just numb. She'd expected traps and fine print, but instead she'd found genuine protections and a lawyer who seemed to actually care about her welfare. The driver was waiting. Mr. DeLuca asked me to take you to lunch, Miss Whitmore. If you're ready. She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. They drove west toward the ocean until the high-rises gave way to residential neighborhoods clinging to steep hills. Finally, the car turned onto a private road that wound up a cliff face, ending at a gate flanked by stone pillars. The driver spoke into an intercom and the gate swung open. Serena's breath caught. The house, if it could be called that, was a masterpiece of glass and steel cantilevered over the cliff edge. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the sky and sea, creating the illusion that the structure floated above the water. Modern, minimalist, absolutely stunning, and isolated. The nearest neighbor was probably a mile away. The car stopped in a circular drive. The driver opened her door. Mr. DeLuca is expecting you on the terrace, Miss Whitmore. She followed a stone path around the side of the house, and there it was. A terrace that seemed to hang suspended over the Pacific, infinity pool blending seamlessly with the horizon, furniture arranged to capture the view. And at a table set for two, Marco DeLuca stood waiting. He'd traded last night's formal suit for dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Somehow, he looked more dangerous this way, relaxed, comfortable, in his element. When he saw her, something crossed his face. Pleasure, maybe, or satisfaction. Serena, thank you for coming. He pulled out a chair. I hope Linda was helpful. Very. She sat, accepted the glass of wine he poured. She told me this contract is the most favorable she's ever seen. Then she told me you don't make mistakes. So which is it, Marco? Mistake or strategy I don't understand yet? His smile was genuine. Neither. Call it an investment in trust. He settled across from her. You met with her alone. She explained your options. Now you know I meant what I said about giving you power in this arrangement. How does that feel? Confusing, she admitted. Everything I know about men like you says this doesn't make sense. Men like me. Considered that. And what do you know about men like me, Serena? What they taught you at Stanford in your safe classrooms? That power corrupts, that criminal organizations operate through fear and control, that people in your position don't voluntarily give up leverage. She met his eyes. Am I wrong? About most of it? No. He leaned back, wine glass dangling from his fingers. But you're missing context. Power does corrupt when it's unchecked. Criminal organizations do use fear when they're run by small men who mistake cruelty for strength. And most people in my position would never give up leverage. He paused. But I watched my father destroy himself trying to control everything and everyone around him. He died alone, paranoid, betrayed by the son he'd tried to break into submission. I learned from his mistakes. You killed him. It wasn't a question. She'd heard the rumors, read between the lines of news articles that had called Vincent DeLuca's death a heart attack, while everyone whispered murder. Marco didn't flinch. I removed a threat to my survival and took what was mine. He would have done the same if I'd given him the chance. No shame, no regret, just fact. Does that frighten you? Yes? Honesty seemed safest, but not as much as dishonesty would. Good. He set down his glass. Then let me be completely honest with you now. This house, this life I'm offering you, it comes with darkness, Serena. I'm not a good man. I've done things that would make you sick if you knew the details. I've ordered deaths. I've destroyed lives. I've broken laws most people don't even know exist. His gaze held hers. But I'm also a man who keeps his word. I promised you protection, education, and freedom. Those aren't empty words. They're the terms of our contract. And what do you get in return? She asked. Besides a wife you can parade in public? Someone to talk to. Simple. Direct. Someone smart enough to understand the game. Someone who might, eventually, decide to play it with me instead of against me. He stood, moved to the terrace railing, looked out at the endless blue. I have money, power, respect born from fear, but I don't have partnership. I don't have someone who sees me clearly and chooses to stay anyway. Serena joined him at the railing, maintaining careful distance. That's a lot to ask of someone you've known for less than 24 hours. I'm not asking you to love me, Serena. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He turned to face her. I'm asking you to give me 6 weeks. Live here. Learn what I can teach you. See this world from the inside. And then, on our wedding day, make a real choice. If you walk away, I'll honor the contract. If you stay, his voice dropped. Then we build something together. Something neither of us could create alone. The ocean wind lifted her hair, salt sweet and wild. Below them, waves crashed against rocks with brutal, beautiful force. Show me, she said. If you want me to understand your world, show me. Not the sanitized version. The truth. Marco's smile was slow, approving, dangerous. As you wish. But first, lunch. You'll need your strength. They ate on the terrace, fresh fish, crisp salad, food that tasted like sunshine and money. Marco asked her about Stanford, her studies, her plans before everything had imploded. She found herself talking, really talking, about her fascination with international relations, the way power shifted between nations like chess pieces on a board. You're thinking too large, he said, refilling her wine. Countries are abstractions. Power doesn't live in governments. It lives in people. Individuals who make decisions, form alliances, betray trust. You want to understand geopolitics? Understand human nature first. And you're an expert on human nature. I'm an expert on leverage. What people want, what they fear, what they'll trade to protect or obtain, either one. He gestured to the view. This house, for example. I bought it from a tech CEO who thought he was untouchable. He'd stolen from his investors, hidden the money offshore, and believed his lawyers made him bulletproof. What happened? I found his mistress, 23 years old, pregnant with his child, hidden in a condo in Oakland while his wife filed for divorce. Marco's voice was matter of fact. I offered the mistress protection and financial security in exchange for testimony. The CEO had 2 choices: sell me this house at 1/3 of market value or watch his empire collapse in criminal court. He chose the house. That's extortion. That's leverage. He smiled. The CEO was a criminal. His investors were victims. I got a house, the mistress got protection, the investors got their money back, and a bad man lost his throne. Where's the injustice? Serena had no answer. The moral lines were blurrier than her professors had ever acknowledged. After lunch, Marco led her inside. The house was even more stunning within. Open spaces flowing seamlessly together, art on the walls that probably cost more than her education, and everywhere, books. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with volumes on philosophy, history, military strategy, psychology. "This is the library," Marco said, watching her reaction. "Everything I know, I learned here. You're welcome to it, all of it." She ran her fingers along the spines, recognizing titles. Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, but also Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, modern psychology texts. "You read philosophy? How else do you understand what you're capable of?" He pulled a book from the shelf. Meditations. Marcus Aurelius wrote this while leading armies and running an empire. He understood that power without self-knowledge is just violence with a crown. "And you have self-knowledge." "I know what I am." He replaced the book carefully. "A man who chose survival over morality and found he was good at it. But I'm curious whether there's more, whether I can build something beyond fear." His eyes found hers. "That's where you come in." "I'm not your redemption, Marco." "No, you're my experiment." He smiled at her sharp look. "I want to know if partnership works better than domination, if trust is more effective than fear. Call it scientific curiosity. Call it insanity." "Maybe." He moved closer, and she held her ground. "But you're curious too. I see it in the way you're looking at these books, this house, me. You want to understand. You want to know if everything you were taught is wrong." His hand lifted, cupped her jaw gently. "I'm offering you the truth, Serena, the real education your university could never provide. All you have to do is stay." His touch burned. She stepped back, breaking contact. "I need boundaries." "Name them." "My own space, privacy, no expectations about—" She gestured vaguely. "Physical intimacy, not until I decide." "Agreed." No hesitation. "Your bedroom is on the second floor, east wing. Private bathroom, sitting area, balcony with ocean views. I'm west wing. We share common spaces, but your room is yours. Locked door if you want it." "And the wedding night?" "Will be whatever you're comfortable with. I'm not interested in forcing myself on an unwilling woman. When you want me, you'll tell me." The confidence in his voice sent heat down her spine. "Until then, we're roommates with a legal contract." Well, it should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like a challenge. "Fine." She straightened her shoulders. "Show me my room." He led her upstairs down a hallway lined with abstract art to a door that opened onto luxury. The bedroom was huge, decorated in soft grays and whites. The bed large enough for 3 people. French doors led to a private balcony where the ocean stretched to infinity. Her suitcases, when had those arrived, waited by the closet. "Your things will be delivered tomorrow," Marco said from the doorway. "Clothes, books, whatever you need. There's a credit card on the dresser. No limit. Use it." She turned to face him. "You've thought of everything." "I try." He studied her for a long moment. "You're afraid. That's smart. But you're also curious. That's dangerous." He smiled. "I'm looking forward to seeing which instinct wins." Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. Serena stood alone in her gilded cage, listening to the ocean, and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. That night, she lay awake in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent except for the distant sound of waves. She should have felt trapped. Instead, she felt something else. Anticipation, maybe. Or the terrible thrill of standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing the fall would either kill her or teach her to fly. The next morning, she found Marco in the kitchen, making coffee. He looked up when she entered, smiled slightly. "Sleep well?" "No." "Neither did I." He poured her a cup, added cream without asking. He'd noticed how she took it at lunch. "We have a meeting this afternoon. Business associates. I want you there." "Why?" "Because they need to see you, understand that you're real, that this marriage is legitimate. Some of them will test you, try to find weakness. I need you to show them there isn't any." Fear and exhilaration tangled in her chest. "What if I'm not ready?" "Then you'll fake it until you are." He set down his cup, voice gentle. "You're Harold Whitmore's daughter. You've been performing your whole life, the perfect politician's child, smiling for cameras, navigating social minefields. This is just a different audience." He was right, and she hated it. The meeting was held in a private room at an upscale restaurant downtown. 6 men, all older, all watching her with predatory interest as Marco made introductions. She smiled, shook hands, played the gracious fiancé while her skin crawled. "So this is the girl," one of them said. Victor, heavy accent, dead eyes. Very pretty, but so young. You robbed the cradle, Marco? I made a strategic alliance, Marco replied smoothly, hand at Serena's back. Serena brings intelligence and connections I value. Connections. Victor's laugh was ugly. Her father is disgraced. What connections? Serena felt Marco tense, but she spoke before he could. You're right. My father made terrible choices. But I'm not my father. She met Victor's gaze directly. I'm Stanford educated, fluent in 3 languages, and I understand how to navigate political and social structures. If you think that's worthless, you're not as smart as Marco believes. Silence. Then Victor threw back his head and laughed, genuine this time. She has teeth. Good. You need woman with spine, Marco. Pretty faces are easy to find. This one, he gestured at Serena with approval. This one might survive. The meeting continued, and Serena listened carefully as they discussed business, legitimate and otherwise. She said little, but she absorbed everything. Names, relationships, the subtle power dynamics that shifted with every sentence. This was education no classroom could provide. Afterward, in the car, Marco turned to her. You did well. Victor is notoriously difficult to impress. He's a pig. Yes, and a useful ally. Marco's expression was unreadable. Welcome to my world, Serena. Everyone here is morally compromised, including me. The question is whether you can live with that. She looked out the window at the city sliding past, her city, transformed into foreign territory. I don't know yet. That's honest. His hand found hers, squeezed gently. You have 6 weeks to decide. The weeks blurred together. Days spent in the library, reading the books Marco recommended. Evenings at dinners and meetings, playing the role of devoted fiancé while learning the architecture of his empire. Nights alone in her room, trying to reconcile the woman she'd been with the woman she was becoming. Marco kept his promise. No pressure, no demands. But he was always there, teaching, challenging, pushing her to think differently. He showed her the legitimate businesses that fronted his operations, the charitable foundations that laundered reputation alongside money, the network of lawyers and politicians and police who looked the other way for the right price. This is how power really works, he told her one evening, showing her spreadsheets that tracked influence like currency. Not through force, but through interdependence. I make people need me, and in return, they protect me. It's still corruption. It's survival. He looked at her seriously. Your professors taught you about justice and rule of law. But law is just codified power, Serena. The people who write the laws protect their own interests. I'm just playing by rules I didn't make. She wanted to argue. Couldn't. Because everything he showed her proved the same ugly truth. The system was rigged, and the only question was which side of the rigging you stood on. 10 days before the wedding, her father called. She hadn't spoken to him since the engagement party. She almost didn't answer. Serena. His voice was thick with emotion. Please. I know you're angry, but I need to explain. You need to explain why you lied to me? Why you let me believe this was about money instead of murder? The words came out hard, sharp. Or maybe you need to explain why you're a coward who sold his daughter instead of facing his own mistakes. I was trying to protect you. By trading me to a stranger, that's protection? Marco DeLuca is a good man. She laughed, bitter and broken. He's a criminal, Dad. He's dangerous and ruthless, and he terrifies me. But at least he's honest about what he is, which is more than I can say for you. Silence on the line. Then quietly, I'm sorry, Serena. I failed you. I know that, but I'm still your father. No. The word came out cold, final. You stopped being my father when you made that deal. Now you're just the man whose debts I'm paying. She ended the call before he could respond, before the tears could fall. That night, she found Marco in the library, reading by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, took in her face, and set down his book. What do you need? He asked simply. The question broke something in her. She crossed the room, sat beside him on the leather sofa, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she let herself cry. Marco didn't speak, didn't touch her. He simply sat there, a steady presence, while she fell apart. When the tears finally stopped, he handed her a handkerchief. Your father called. How did you know? Because I know that look, the grief that comes from losing someone who's still alive. His voice was quiet. I'm sorry. Why? You got what you wanted. Not like this. He turned to face her fully. I wanted your partnership, Serena, not your pain. If I could have saved your family without destroying your relationship with them, I would have. Would you? She looked at him through swollen eyes. Or is this part of the strategy? Isolate me. Make you the only solid thing in my life. Ensure I have nowhere else to go. He didn't look away. I don't know. Maybe both. I'm not a good man, Serena. I've told you that. But I'm trying to be better. For you. His hand lifted, cupped her face gently, thumb brushing away a tear. You make me want to be better. The admission hung between them, raw and real. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. His certainty was absolute. You're stronger than you know, and you're not alone. She wanted to believe him, almost did. The wedding was 10 days away, and Serena still didn't know if she would go through with it or run. But running was never really an option, and they both knew it. The next morning, Marco found her on the terrace at dawn, watching fog roll across the water like something alive. He set a coffee cup beside her, said nothing, just stood there in the gray light until she finally spoke. Tell me about your father. He went very still. Why? Because you said you learned from his mistakes. I want to understand what that means. She turned to face him. If I'm going to be part of this world, I need to know what happens when power goes wrong. Marco was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned against the railing, eyes on the distant horizon. Vincent DeLuca believed that fear was the only currency that mattered. He built his empire by making examples of people, brutal, public examples that ensured everyone else fell in line. He thought love was weakness. Trust was stupidity. The only way to hold power was to make sure everyone around you was more afraid of you than they were of your enemies. And it worked? For a while. He controlled everything from the docks to City Hall. Judges, politicians, police, everyone paid tribute or paid in blood. Marco's voice was flat, emotionless. But fear is expensive. It requires constant reinforcement, and it makes you paranoid because you know that the moment you show weakness, the people you've terrorized will tear you apart. What happened? He got sick, cancer. Suddenly, the man everyone feared was dying, and the sharks started circling. Marco's jaw tightened. He tried to tighten his grip even harder, started seeing betrayal everywhere, killed loyal men on suspicion, alienated allies, drove away anyone who might have actually cared about him. By the end, he was alone in a hospital room, surrounded by guards he didn't trust, waiting for someone to put a pillow over his face. Did you? No. He met her eyes. I didn't have to. One of his own guards did it for me, a man whose brother my father had killed in a fit of paranoia. His smile was cold. The guard came to me afterward, expected punishment. I promoted him instead. Sent a message to everyone who'd served Vincent DeLuca. The old way was dead. We were building something different. Serena's hands tightened on the railing. Different how? Loyalty earned instead of beaten out of people. Alliances built on mutual benefit instead of terror. I kept the empire, but I changed how it ran. He moved closer. I'm not stupid enough to think I'm a good man, Serena, but I learned that sustainable power comes from making people want to protect you, not forcing them to fear you. It's more efficient, and it means I sleep better at night. Do you sleep well? Better than my father did. He touched her hand, just fingertips against her wrist. I'm telling you this so you understand. I'm not him. I won't become him. That's the promise I made to myself when I took over, and it's the promise I'm making to you now. She wanted to believe him. The terrifying thing was that she almost did. Show me more, she said. Not just the theory, the reality. I want to see what you actually do. His eyes searched hers, looking for something. Are you sure? No, but I'm tired of being afraid of shadows. Show me what they really look like. That afternoon, she learned what Marco DeLuca's empire actually meant. They drove to the waterfront, to a warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside, but hummed with activity within. Inside, men unloaded crates from shipping containers while others checked manifests, inspected contents, and coordinated logistics with the precision of a military operation. Importing business, Marco said, guiding her through the organized chaos. Officially, we handle furniture, textiles, electronics. Unofficially, He gestured to a man opening a crate to reveal vacuum-sealed packages beneath a layer of legitimate goods. Pharmaceuticals, not the kind you get from doctors. Serena's stomach tightened. Drugs. Medicine. His correction was sharp. We don't touch the poison. No fentanyl, no synthetic garbage that kills people by the dozen. What we move is pharmaceutical grade, painkillers for people who can't afford their prescriptions, insulin at prices that won't bankrupt diabetics, medications that insurance companies refuse to cover. He stopped in front of a shipment being sorted. Yes, it's illegal. Yes, we profit from it. But we're filling gaps left by a healthcare system that values money over lives. That's a justification, not a defense. I know. He met her eyes. I'm not asking you to approve. I'm asking you to understand the difference between what I do and what other people in my position do. We have rules, standards, lines we don't cross. A man approached, young, nervous, tablet in hand. Mr. DeLuca, we have a problem with the Chicago shipment. They're asking for product we specifically said we don't carry. Tell Chicago no. If they push, cut them off entirely. Marco's voice was cold. We're not changing our standards because someone wants to make an extra 20%. They won't be happy. I don't care if they're happy. I care that we don't contribute to the body count. Marco's gaze was ice. Send the message. The man nodded, disappeared. Marco turned back to Serena. That's the reality. Every day I make choices about what we will and won't do. Sometimes those choices cost money. Sometimes they cost relationships. But they keep this operation from becoming the thing I swore I'd never build. My father's empire, just with better marketing. They spent hours in the warehouse. Marco explained the supply chains, the distribution networks, the careful balance between legitimate business and shadow operations. He introduced her to his people, not as decoration, but as someone they needed to respect. She watched them defer to him not out of fear, but something closer to loyalty, maybe even trust. It should have disgusted her. Instead, she found herself fascinated by the architecture of it all, the way he'd built systems that protected his interests while maintaining some version of ethics. It was still criminal, still wrong by every measure she'd been raised to believe, but it was also more complex than she'd expected. That evening, over dinner in the glass house, she asked the question that had been burning in her mind all day. How do you justify it? Really? Marco set down his fork, considered. I don't. Justification implies I think what I'm doing is right. I don't. I think it's necessary. He leaned back. The world is broken, Serena. The systems that are supposed to protect people, government, healthcare, justice, they're rigged in favor of people who already have power. I exist in the gaps those systems create. I provide services they won't, protection they can't, solutions they refuse to offer. At a profit. Always at a profit. I'm not a charity. His smile was sharp. But I'm also not the villain your professors warned you about. I'm just someone who saw how the game actually works and decided to play it better than the people pretending to be legitimate. That's moral relativism. That's survival. He stood, moved to the window, looked out at the darkening sky. You asked me to show you reality. Here it is. There are no heroes, Serena, just people making choices based on incomplete information and hoping they can live with the consequences. I've made peace with my choices. The question is whether you can make peace with being connected to them. She joined him at the window, studied his reflection in the glass. What if I can't? Then you leave. Take the trust fund, the protections, everything I promised, and you build a different life knowing your family is safe. He turned to face her directly. But I think you can. I think you're strong enough to hold the complexity. And I think part of you is curious what you could become if you stop trying to be the good girl your father raised you to be. The word struck home like a blade, because he was right. Part of her was tired of being Harold Whitmore's perfect daughter, the obedient child who smiled for cameras and never made waves. Part of her wanted to know what it felt like to have real power instead of borrowed respectability. That's dangerous thinking, she whispered. Everything worthwhile is dangerous. His hand lifted, cupped her face. The question is whether the risk is worth the reward. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. He checked it, expression darkening. I need to make a call. Excuse me. He left her standing at the window, and she tried not to feel abandoned. 20 minutes later, he found her in the library. We have a situation. The tone of his voice made her spine straighten. What kind of situation? The kind that tests whether you're ready for this life. He crossed to the desk, pulled up security footage on a laptop. Someone tried to breach the perimeter an hour ago. My team caught them, and they're claiming they have information about a threat to you. Ice slid through her veins. To me? Could be legitimate. Could be a setup to get inside the house. He looked at her seriously. I'm telling you because you need to decide how involved you want to be. I can handle this quietly, and you never have to know the details. Or you can come with me, see how these things are managed, and understand exactly what protection means in my world. Her mouth went dry. Where are they? Lower level, secured room. He studied her carefully. This isn't a game, Serena. If you come down there, you'll see things that might change how you look at me. At yourself. Once you cross that line, you can't uncross it. She thought about the girl she'd been 6 weeks ago. Stanford student, politician's daughter, naive enough to believe the world had rules that mattered. That girl would have stayed upstairs, let Marco handle it, maintained plausible deniability. But that girl was gone. Burned away in rose gardens and engagement parties, and contracts signed in blood disguised as ink. Show me, she said. Marco's eyes flashed with something that might have been pride, or concern, maybe both. Follow me. They descended stairs she hadn't known existed, hidden behind a panel in the kitchen, leading down into the cliff itself. The lower level was concrete and steel, utilitarian and cold. Security monitors lined one wall. A weapons locker stood in the corner, and at the far end, a reinforced door with a keypad lock. Marco punched in a code. The door opened to reveal a sparse room, table, chairs, no windows. And sitting in one of those chairs, hands zip-tied, was a woman in her 30s with a split lip and terrified eyes. 2 of Marco's men stood guard. They straightened when he entered. Report, Marco said. The older guard, Thomas, Serena remembered from previous introductions, gestured to the woman. Caught her trying to scale the east fence. She's carrying an ID that says she's Melissa Russo, works as a paralegal downtown. Claims she has information about a contract on Miss Whitmore's life. Serena's breath caught. Marco's expression didn't change. Who sent you? He asked the woman, voice conversational. No one sent me. Melissa's voice shook. I work for a law firm that handles some of Viktor Kozlov's business. I overheard a conversation. They were planning something about your fiancé. I tried to call the police, but she laughed bitterly. They told me to mind my business, so I came here. Why would you risk that? Marco moved closer. You don't know me. Don't know, Serena. Why get involved? Because I have a daughter. Tears spilled down Melissa's face. She's 21, college student. If someone was planning to hurt her and no one would help, I'd hope somebody would care enough to try. She looked at Serena directly. I'm sorry I scared you, but they're coming. Victor's people. They think if they take you, they can control Mr. DeLuca, force him into deals he'd never agree to otherwise. The room went very quiet. Marco's hand moved to his phone. Thomas, get Linda Chen on the line. Now. I want to know everything about Melissa Russo. Employment, family, finances, parking tickets, everything. 5 minutes. He turned to the woman. If you're lying, you'll regret climbing that fence. If you're telling the truth, you'll be compensated and protected. Clear? Melissa nodded, still crying. Marco gestured for Serena to follow him outside. In the hallway, he turned to her, face grave. This is what I meant about the fishbowl. You're a target now. A way to get to me. Do you believe her? Serena asked, proud that her voice didn't shake. I don't know yet, but I'm not taking chances with your safety. He pulled out his phone, started typing rapidly. I'm doubling your security detail. No more solo trips to campus or the city. Everywhere you go with protection. Marco, this is not negotiable. His eyes met hers, fierce and protective. Victor was already a problem. If he's escalating to kidnapping, I need to remove him from the board. But that takes time. And in the meantime, you're vulnerable. Fear crawled up her spine, but she forced it down. What do you need me to do? He stopped typing, looked at her with something like wonder. Most people would be hysterical right now. Most people haven't spent the last month learning to think like you. She straightened her shoulders. You taught me that panic is useless. Strategy is everything. So tell me the strategy. His smile was slow, genuine, fierce. The strategy is we accelerate the wedding. 4 days instead of 10. Move it to a more secure location. And we make sure Victor and anyone else considering a move understands that touching you means war. 4 days, her heart hammered. That's not enough time. It's all the time we have. He stepped closer, hands framing her face. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you're still deciding if you can live with this. But right now, the safest place for you is as my wife. Legally, publicly, irrevocably mine. Once we're married, anyone who comes after you is declaring war on my entire operation. That's a line most people won't cross. She searched his face, saw the truth there. He was afraid. Not for himself, but for her. It was written in the tension around his eyes, the careful control of his voice, the way his hands trembled slightly against her skin. 4 days, she repeated. And then what? Then you're mine to protect. And I'm very good at protecting what's mine. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Say yes, Serena. Trust me to keep you safe. She thought about Melissa Russo, crying in a concrete room because she'd cared enough to risk her life for a stranger's daughter. Thought about Victor's dead eyes and predatory smile. Thought about the warehouse full of illegal pharmaceuticals and the careful ethics of a criminal empire. Thought about Marco's hands, gentle on her face, and the cold calculation in his eyes when he'd ordered Chicago cut off for crossing his moral lines. None of it made sense. All of it terrified her. Yes, she whispered. 4 days. His kiss was brief, fierce, a promise sealed in heat and desperation. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that might have been relief or might have been triumph. Good girl, he murmured. Then louder. Thomas, get me Victor Kozlov's location and call everyone in. We're moving up the timeline. The next 4 days were a blur of organized chaos. Linda Chen arrived within the hour, confirmed Melissa's story through her law firm contacts and public records. Victor had indeed been planning a kidnapping, scheduled for the day after the original wedding date, when security would be focused on ceremony logistics rather than perimeter defense. He's getting desperate, Marco told Serena that night, in the library where they'd spent hours planning. He owes money to people who make my operation look like a church group. He thought he could leverage you to force me into paying his debts or giving him territory. He was wrong. What are you going to do? End the threat. Simple. Final. When she opened her mouth to ask for details, he shook his head. Don't. You don't need that knowledge. Let me carry it. But she did need it. Needed to understand exactly what kind of man she was binding herself to. I want to know. Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, showed her a series of photographs. Victor's businesses, restaurants, clubs, import companies. By tomorrow morning, every one of these will have failed a surprise health inspection or been flagged for tax irregularities or lost their liquor license. Legitimate channels, legal pressure. Victor's revenue stream dies without a shot fired. And Victor himself? Will receive a visit from some mutual acquaintances who will explain that his options are leave the country or leave in a box. Most people choose option 1. Marco's voice was cold, matter of fact. I don't need to kill him, Serena. I just need to make him irrelevant. That's still destroying someone's life. Yes, to protect yours. He moved closer, voice dropping. I told you I'm not a good man. This is what that means. I will dismantle anyone who threatens you without losing a minute of sleep. If you can't accept that, tell me now. She should have been horrified, should have run. Instead, she felt something warm and terrible unfurl in her chest. Security, protection, the absolute certainty that this man would burn the world to keep her safe. I can accept it, she said quietly. I don't know what that says about me. It says you're a survivor. His hand found hers squeezed. Like me. The wedding was rescheduled for Friday evening, private ceremony at the Glass House, instead of the planned cathedral downtown. Just immediate family, a handful of trusted associates, and enough security to defend a small country. Serena's mother had cried when she'd called to explain the change. Her father had tried to object, to insist on a proper public wedding. She'd hung up on him. Jamie had been different. Is this what you want? He'd asked, voice quiet. I don't know, she'd admitted. But it's what I'm choosing. Then I'll be there. Someone from our family should actually support you. The words had made her cry. Now it was Friday afternoon, and she stood in her bedroom while a stylist worked on her hair and a seamstress made final adjustments to her dress. Not the elaborate gown her mother had chosen for the cathedral wedding, but something simpler, elegant, ivory silk that draped like water, no veil, no train, a dress for a real marriage instead of a performance. Her mother knocked, entered without waiting for permission. Patricia looked older, smaller, diminished by the weight of the last month. "You look beautiful," she said softly. "So grown up." "I don't feel grown up." Serena watched her reflection in the mirror. "I feel like I'm playing dress up in someone else's life." "I know the feeling." Patricia moved closer, adjusted a strand of hair the stylist had placed perfectly. "I was 22 when I married your father. I thought I was choosing love. Turned out I was choosing obligation." Her smile was sad. "But you're smarter than I was. You went into this with your eyes open." "Did I?" Serena turned to face her mother. "Or did I just trade one kind of cage for another?" "I don't know, sweetheart. But I've watched you these past weeks. You're different, sharper, more confident." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "You're becoming someone I barely recognize. Someone stronger than I ever was. Is that a good thing?" "I think it might be." Her mother kissed her forehead. "Be happy, Serena. Or if you can't be happy, be free. That's all I want for you." After her mother left, Serena stood alone in front of the mirror, studying the stranger looking back at her. Dark hair pinned up to expose her neck. Minimal jewelry, just diamond studs Marco had sent that morning. Silk dress that made her look older, sophisticated, dangerous. She looked like someone who could stand beside Marco DeLuca and not be swallowed by his shadow. The question was whether that was who she actually was, or just who she was pretending to be. A knock. Marco's voice. "May I come in?" She should have said no. The groom wasn't supposed to see the bride before the ceremony, but nothing about this was traditional. "Yes." He entered, and her breath caught. Black suit, perfectly tailored, no tie, dark hair combed back, eyes intense. He looked like power incarnate, and for a moment she forgot how to think. "You're stunning," he said, voice rough, then softer. "How are you holding up?" "Terrified. You?" "Same." He crossed to her, held out a small box. "I wanted to give you this before. A wedding gift." She opened it. Inside, a key on a platinum chain. "What's this?" "Safe deposit box, downtown bank. Inside you'll find cash, identification documents under a different name, and instructions for accounts in Switzerland and the Caymans. Everything you need to disappear if you ever need to run." He met her eyes. "I meant what I said about freedom, Serena. This is your emergency exit. Use it if you ever have to." Her hands trembled. He was giving her the tools to destroy him, to escape him, to vanish completely. On their wedding day. "Why would you do this?" "Because I love you." The words were simple, devastating. "I know it's too soon. I know you don't feel the same way, but I've loved you since that first conversation at the gala, and I'll love you whether you stay or go. This key is proof that I'd rather lose you than cage you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She didn't try to stop them. "Marco, don't." He wiped her tears gently. "Don't say anything yet. Marry me first. Then decide what you feel, but know that whatever you choose, you'll have options. Always." He kissed her forehead, then left her standing there with the key clutched in her hand and her heart breaking open in ways she hadn't known were possible. The ceremony was at sunset, on the terrace overlooking the Pacific. 20 guests, an officiant who asked no questions. Jamie stood beside her as she walked the short distance to where Marco waited, backlit by dying sunlight, and looking at her like she was something holy. The vows were brief, traditional words that felt revolutionary in their simplicity. She promised to love and honor. He promised to protect and cherish. They exchanged rings, white gold, simple, binding. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Marco kissed her, and this time it was different. Not performance or claiming, but promise, connection. The beginning of something neither of them could control. When they broke apart, his eyes held questions. She answered by taking his hand, squeezing tight, choosing to stay in this moment instead of running from it. The reception was brief, toasts and champagne, and congratulations from people who looked at her differently now. Not as Harold Whitmore's daughter or Marco's acquisition, but as someone who'd earned her place through survival and strength. But halfway through dinner, one of Marco's men approached, whispered something urgent. Marco's expression went cold. "What is it?" Serena asked. "Victor." He stood, voice tight with controlled fury. "He's making his move. Tonight. The bastard is using our wedding as cover." Fear and rage tangled in her chest. "What do we do?" "We?" Marco looked at her sharply. "You stay here, under guard, while I handle this." "No." She stood, facing him down in front of everyone. "You said I was your partner. You gave me keys and promises and legal protections. But if I'm just going to hide while you fight my battles, then this is still a cage." Her voice didn't shake. "I want to help. Tell me how." The room had gone silent. Every eye was on them. Marco stared at her like he'd never seen her before. Then he smiled, fierce and proud and absolutely genuine. "All right, wife, let's go to work." He led her down to the operations room in the lower level, their wedding guests forgotten upstairs. The concrete space had transformed into a command center, monitors displaying security feeds from across the city, encrypted phones buzzing with updates, and 6 of Marco's most trusted people coordinating responses with military precision. Thomas looked up from a laptop, surprise flickering across his face when he saw Serena in her wedding dress. "Mrs. DeLuca, congratulations." The title sent a jolt through her. Mrs. DeLuca. Not Whitmore anymore. She'd become someone else in the space of 20 minutes. "Status," Marco said, hand still gripping Serena's. "Victor's hitting 3 locations simultaneously." Thomas pulled up surveillance footage. "The warehouse we showed Mrs. DeLuca last week, the downtown office building, and your wine distribution center in Oakland. He's using the wedding as cover, thinking our attention is divided." "Is it working?" Serena asked before she could stop herself. Thomas's smile was sharp. "No, ma'am. We've had advance warning thanks to the paralegal's information. We evacuated valuable inventory yesterday and replaced it with marked decoys. Victor's people are currently stealing product that'll lead federal investigators straight to their door by morning." Marco's thumb stroked across her knuckles, a gesture so casual she almost didn't notice. "Show me the warehouse feed." The screen changed to grainy footage of men in dark clothes loading boxes into trucks. Amateur hour compared to the operation Serena had witnessed. No coordination, no efficiency, just smash and grab desperation. "They're sloppy," she observed, "moving too fast, not checking for surveillance." "Victor's desperate," Marco agreed. "He's already lost half his revenue stream. This is a final gamble to steal enough of my operation to cover his debts. It won't work." "But it could have," Serena said slowly, mind working through the implications. "If he'd timed it differently, if we hadn't known." The wedding was smart misdirection. He just didn't account for Melissa Russo's conscience. Marco turned to look at her, something shifting in his expression. "Go on." He's thinking tactically but not strategically. The hits are simultaneous to overwhelm your response, but he didn't secure his escape route first. Where's he planning to go with stolen merchandise? Who's buying? He needed those deals locked before he made his move. She gestured to the screen. "This isn't a plan. It's panic." The room had gone quiet. Thomas was staring at her with undisguised respect. Marco's smile was slow, dangerous, proud. "You're right," he said softly. "Which means Victor has another play. Something we're not seeing." He turned to Thomas. "Pull up his known associates. Focus on anyone with cross-border connections. He'll need to move the product out of the country to avoid my network." "On it." Thomas's fingers flew across the keyboard. Serena's mind raced, thinking through everything Marco had taught her about leverage and human nature. He needs money now, today. Otherwise, why risk everything on our wedding night? So who would pay cash on delivery for stolen goods? "The Salazar cartel out of Mexico," Marco said immediately. "They've been trying to establish territory in Northern California for years. Victor giving them a foothold in my supply chain would be worth immediate payment. Can you stop it?" "Already done." He pulled out his phone, sent a rapid series of texts. "I have people at every border crossing and port between here and Mexico. If Victor tries to move products south, we'll intercept." His eyes met hers. "But you just gave me a better idea." "What?" "We let him think he succeeded. Let him move the decoy product to his buyers. And when the Salazar cartel realizes they've purchased marked inventory that'll bring federal attention down on their entire operation, they'll blame Victor for the setup." His smile turned cold. "They'll do my work for me." "That's..." Serena searched for the word. "Ruthless." "Yes." He didn't look away. "Still want to help?" She thought about Melissa Russo risking her life to warn them, about Victor's dead eyes when he'd called her pretty and young, about the key on the chain around her neck that promised freedom if she wanted it, about Marco giving her that key on their wedding day. Tell me what you need. What he needed, apparently, was for her to make a phone call. Marco handed her a burner phone and a script. Victor's contact at the Salazar cartel is a man named Rafael Torres. He's expecting Victor to call with confirmation of the shipment. You're going to call instead. Me? Why would he listen to me? Because you're going to tell him the truth. That you're Marco DeLuca's new wife, that Victor attempted to kidnap you and steal from your husband, and that the shipment Victor is offering contains marked product designed to trap unwary buyers. Marco's eyes held hers. You're going to give Rafael the choice: walk away from the deal and avoid federal prosecution, or proceed and become collateral damage in someone else's war. Her heart hammered. You want me to warn your enemy? I want you to demonstrate that we don't operate like Victor. We don't trick people into destroying themselves. We give them information and let them make their own choices. He touched her face gently. Rafael Torres is a businessman, not a psychopath. He'll understand the play, and he'll remember that Marco DeLuca's wife called to warn him when she could have let him walk into a trap. That's... She struggled to find the word. Strategic. That's building alliances instead of burning bridges. He smiled slightly. You said Victor was thinking tactically instead of strategically. Show him how strategy works. She took the phone with shaking hands. Marco dialed the number, put it on speaker. It rang twice. Yes? The voice was heavily accented, cautious. Mr. Torres, my name is Serena DeLuca. I'm calling about the shipment Victor Kozlov has offered you. Silence. Then, carefully, I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. And you should know that the merchandise is marked. If you take possession, you'll be flagged by federal investigators within 48 hours. She kept her voice steady, professional. My husband wanted me to give you this information so you can make an informed decision. Walk away from Victor's deal, find legitimate suppliers, or proceed and accept the consequences. Another pause. Why would Marco DeLuca warn me? Because he prefers doing business with people who understand strategy over people driven by desperation. Victor is a drowning man pulling everyone around him under. You don't have to drown with him. She glanced at Marco, who nodded encouragement. My husband will be in touch next month about establishing proper distribution channels if you're interested. But tonight, walk away. That's my only message. She ended the call before Rafael could respond, hands trembling. Marco took the phone from her, set it aside, and pulled her into his arms. Perfect, he murmured against her hair. Absolutely perfect. You just turned a potential enemy into a future ally and doomed Victor in the same conversation. I didn't doom him. I just told the truth. In this world, the truth is often the sharpest weapon. He pulled back to look at her. How do you feel? Terrified, exhilarated, like I just stepped off a cliff. She laughed shakily. Is this what you meant about partnership? Yes. He kissed her forehead. Welcome to the game, wife. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Victor's crews finished loading the decoy merchandise and scattered before Marco's people could intercept. Rafael Torres pulled his people back from the border crossing where the exchange was supposed to happen. And somewhere in the city, Victor Kozlov realized his carefully planned heist had netted him nothing but problems. Marco's phone rang at midnight. He answered, put it on speaker so Serena could hear. You son of a bitch! Victor's voice was ragged with fury and fear. You set me up! No, Victor, you set yourself up. I just didn't stop you. Marco's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. Did you really think you could steal from me during my wedding? That I wouldn't have contingencies? The Salazar cartel will do nothing. My wife called Rafael Torres personally to warn him about your marked merchandise. By now, he's realizing you tried to use him as a pawn in a play against me. How do you think that conversation is going to go? Silence on the line. When Victor spoke again, his voice had changed, smaller, defeated. What do you want? I want you gone. Out of San Francisco by dawn. Out of California by the end of the week. You have 24 hours to liquidate what's left of your assets and disappear. If I see you or hear about you operating anywhere on the West Coast after that, I'll send the federal case file we've compiled directly to the FBI. Clear? You're letting me go? I'm giving you a choice. Exile or prison. Most people choose exile. Marco's voice hardened. But if you ever come near my wife again, if you even think her name too loudly, I will find you, and exile won't be an option anymore. Understand? Yes. Good. You have 24 hours. Use them wisely. Marco ended the call, set down the phone, and turned to Serena. It's done. She stared at him. You're just letting him walk away? He's not walking away. He's running. There's a difference. Marco moved to the monitors, pulled up financial records. By tomorrow, Victor will be broke, blacklisted, and persona non grata in every city that matters. He'll spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, knowing that one mistake means I find him. That's a worse punishment than a bullet. Is it? She moved closer to the screens, studying Victor's crumbling empire. Or is it mercy disguised as strategy? Marco looked at her sharply. What do you mean? You could have killed him. You have the resources, the justification, but you chose exile instead. That's either brilliant strategy, keeping your hands clean while destroying him anyway, or it's mercy. Proof that you're not your father. She met his eyes. Which is it? He was quiet for a long moment. Both. Does that bother you? No. The answer surprised her. It makes me think maybe you were right. Maybe there's a difference between sustainable power and terror. His smile was small, genuine. You're learning. I have a good teacher. She glanced at the screens one more time, then made a decision. Can we go upstairs now? I'd like to enjoy what's left of my wedding night. Something heated in his gaze. Are you sure? She thought about the key around her neck, the contract with its escape clauses, the phone call she'd just made to a cartel lieutenant, the way Marco had led her into his war room instead of locking her safely upstairs. He'd promised her protection and freedom in equal measure, and somehow, impossibly, he'd delivered both. I'm sure. She took his hand. Come on, husband, you owe me a first dance. They returned to the terrace where their guests had been celebrating without them. Jamie caught her eye, raised an eyebrow in question. She smiled, squeezed Marco's hand, and nodded. Her brother visibly relaxed. The band had been playing soft jazz, but at Marco's signal they shifted to something slower, more intimate. He led her to the center of the terrace, one hand at her waist, the other cradling hers against his chest. I didn't think we'd actually get here, he murmured as they swayed. Part of me expected you to run. I still have the key. I could run tomorrow. You could. His thumb brushed her spine. Will you? She looked up at him, this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly honest man she'd married. Ask me again in a year. His laugh was surprised, genuine. Fair enough. They danced under the stars while the Pacific whispered below, and their guests pretended not to watch. When the song ended, Marco didn't release her. Instead, he pulled her closer, lips brushing her ear. I meant what I said earlier. I love you. You don't have to say it back. You don't have to feel anything you don't feel. But I needed you to know. Her heart stuttered. She turned her head, found his mouth with hers, and kissed him with all the complicated emotions she couldn't name. Fear and trust. Anger and gratitude. The terrible, wonderful acknowledgement that she'd married a monster who was trying very hard to be a man. When they broke apart, his eyes were dark with want. Bedroom? Bedroom, she agreed. He made their excuses to the remaining guests, smooth, charming, giving nothing away. Then he led her upstairs to the master suite she hadn't entered since moving into the glass house. His room, not hers. Larger, more masculine, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made it feel like they were suspended above the ocean. He closed the door behind them, and suddenly the air was different, charged, dangerous. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for, he said, though his voice was rough with want. We can just sleep, talk, whatever you need. She studied him in the moonlight streaming through the windows, strong, controlled, giving her the choice even now, even when she could see how badly he wanted her. I'm ready, she said. I think I've been ready since you kissed me in the rose garden and promised I'd never be bored. His smile was slow, devastating. I keep my promises. He proved it that night, in ways that left her breathless and shaking and absolutely certain she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. He was gentle and fierce by turns, attentive to every gasp and shiver, and when she finally fell apart in his arms, she understood something fundamental. This was power too. Not the kind wielded in boardrooms or war rooms, but something more primal. The power of trust, of vulnerability accepted and protected. He could destroy her now, emotionally, if not physically, and she'd given him the weapons to do it. But as he held her afterward, heart racing against hers, she realized he'd done the same, given her access to something soft and honest beneath all his carefully constructed armor. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered against his shoulder. "Be married. Be part of your world. I'm going to make mistakes." "So will I." His fingers traced patterns on her spine. "We'll figure it out together." "Promise. Promise." He kissed her temple. "Sleep, Serena. Tomorrow we start building our empire." She fell asleep in her husband's arms, wearing the key to her freedom around her neck, and dreamed of glass houses and endless oceans. The next morning, she woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. Marco was already up, standing at the windows in dark slacks and no shirt, phone pressed to his ear. She watched him work, noting the careful control in his voice, the way he moved through problems like water around stones. When he ended the call and turned, he found her watching him. His smile was soft, private. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband." The words still felt foreign, but less terrifying. "What's the damage?" "Victor crossed into Nevada 2 hours ago. Rafael Torres sent a message thanking you for the warning and suggesting a meeting next month. And federal investigators raided 3 of Victor's former properties at dawn. He's finished." Marco moved to the bed, sat on the edge. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm someone else." She sat up, sheets pooling at her waist. "Is that normal? After marrying a crime lord and helping dismantle his enemy on your wedding night? I'd say it's expected." His hand found hers. "Do you regret it?" She considered the question seriously. Yesterday she'd been Serena Whitmore, college student, politician's daughter, naive believer in systems that didn't actually work. Today she was Serena DeLuca, wife to a criminal magnate, strategic partner in an empire built on moral complexity. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. I'm terrified, but not sorry." "Good." He kissed her knuckles. "Because we have work to do. I want to show you the legitimate side of the operation, the parts that could actually change things." "Over breakfast on the terrace," he explained. Beneath the shadow empire of imports and distribution, Marco ran a network of legitimate businesses. Tech startups that hired people with criminal records, microfinancing programs for entrepreneurs the banks rejected, healthcare clinics in neighborhoods the city had forgotten. It was still about power, still about building influence, but it was also about creating something beyond his father's legacy of fear. "I don't do it to be noble," he said, watching her process the information. "I do it because sustainable power requires giving people a reason to protect you beyond fear. If I employ 1,000 people who couldn't get work anywhere else, that's 1,000 families invested in my success. If I provide healthcare to communities the system abandoned, that's loyalty money can't buy. It's still manipulation. It's still survival, but at least some people benefit beyond me." He leaned back. "I'm not asking you to love what I do, Serena. I'm asking if you can work with it, use it, shape it into something better than what my father built." She thought about the warehouse, the marked product, the careful ethics of refusing certain business. Thought about Melissa Russo and Rafael Torres and the difference between strategy and cruelty. Thought about the key around her neck that promised escape if she needed it. "Show me the healthcare clinics," she said. "I want to see them." They spent the next week in a strange kind of honeymoon. Days visiting the legitimate operations, clinics that operated on sliding scale fees, legal aid offices funded through Marco's charitable foundation, job training programs for ex-convicts. Nights in the glass house, learning each other's rhythms, mapping the boundaries of their partnership. Serena met with Linda Chen to establish her own foundation, separate from Marco's, focused on educational programs for at-risk youth. She used the trust fund he'd given her to seed it, turned strategy lessons learned in war rooms into grant proposals and program designs. "You're building your own power base," Marco observed one evening, reading over her proposal drafts. "Smart. I learned from the best." She looked up from her laptop. "Is it a problem?" "On the contrary, it's exactly what I hoped for." He set down the papers. "A partnership requires both people bringing something valuable. You're creating value independent of me. That makes you more powerful, not less." "And you're not threatened by that?" Why would I be threatened by my wife becoming formidable? His smile was genuine. I married you because you were smart enough to survive in this world. Watching you thrive in it is better than I imagined. 2 weeks after the wedding, Serena received a call from her brother. I need to talk to you, in person. They met at a coffee shop near his school, neutral territory. Jamie looked older than 16, worn down by knowledge no teenager should carry. Mom's leaving Dad, he said without preamble. Filed for divorce yesterday. Said she's done pretending everything's fine. Serena's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. What? Dad's a mess, drinking, paranoid, convinced someone's going to kill him even though Marco already cleared the debts. Mom said she can't watch him destroy himself anymore. Jamie's voice was flat, too controlled. She asked if I wanted to come live with you. The question hung between them, weighted with impossible implications. What did you tell her? Serena asked carefully. That I'd ask you first, because I know your situation is, he gestured vaguely, complicated, and I don't want to put you in a position where Marco feels like you're bringing problems into his house. Rage flared hot in her chest. Marco doesn't control who I love or who I help. You're my brother. If you need a place to stay, you have one, no question. Are you sure? Because I've heard things about him, Serena. Scary things. And I don't want... Stop. She reached across the table, gripped his hand. Marco is complicated. His world is dangerous. But he's never made me feel unsafe, and he won't make you feel unsafe either. If you want to live with us, we'll make it work. Okay? Jamie's eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink away. Okay, thank you. That evening, she told Marco about the conversation. They were in the library, her reading while he worked through contracts. She set down her book, gathered her courage. My brother needs a place to stay. My mother's divorcing my father, and Jamie asked if he could live with us. Marco looked up from his papers, expression unreadable. How do you feel about that? I want to say yes, but I needed to talk to you first because this is your house, and I don't want to assume... Serena. He cut her off gently. This is your house too. You're not a guest here. If your brother needs a home, he has one. No discussion necessary. Relief flooded through her. You're sure? A teenage boy is a lot of chaos. I survived building an empire from the ground up. I think I can handle a 16-year-old. His smile was slight. Besides, family is important. I'm not going to ask you to choose between your brother and this life. We make room for both. She crossed to him, sat on his lap, and kissed him with gratitude and something warmer. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until he raids the refrigerator at midnight and leaves dishes everywhere. But his arms were tight around her, protective and sure. Jamie moved in the following weekend. Marco had one of the guest suites converted into a teenager's room, gaming setup, study desk, private bathroom. When Jamie saw it, his face crumpled. I can't... He looked at Marco, struggling. Why are you being so nice to me? Because you're Serena's family. That makes you mine, too. Marco's voice was matter of fact. You'll go to school, keep your grades up, and stay out of my business operations. In exchange, you get a home, safety, and whatever support you need. Fair? Fair. Jamie stuck out his hand. Marco shook it, man to man, and Serena's heart did something complicated in her chest. Life settled into a new rhythm. Serena worked on her foundation during the day, attended strategy sessions with Marco in the evening, helped Jamie with homework when he struggled with calculus. It was domestic and dangerous in equal measure. Breakfast on the terrace, followed by meetings with people who carried guns, family dinners interrupted by encrypted calls about border crossings and federal investigations. Marco was careful to shield Jamie from the worst of it, but her brother wasn't stupid. One night, 3 weeks after moving in, he cornered Serena in the kitchen. I know what Marco does. I'm not an idiot. She set down the tea she'd been making. I know you're not. Are you safe? Really safe? Because if he ever hurts you, he won't. The certainty in her voice surprised them both. I know how it looks from the outside, Jamie, but Marco's not what you think. He's complicated, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But he's also the person who gave you a home without asking questions, who gave me freedom when he could have demanded obedience, who's trying very hard to build something better than what he inherited. You sound like you're in love with him. Was she? She'd stopped trying to untangle her feelings weeks ago. Fear, respect, gratitude, desire, they'd all bled together into something she couldn't name but couldn't deny. Maybe I am, she said quietly. Is that wrong? I don't know. Jamie's voice was small. I just don't want you to get hurt. Neither does he. That's the strange thing. Everyone warns you about monsters. No one tells you what to do when the monster hands you a weapon and teaches you how to survive. Her brother studied her for a long moment. You've changed. You're not the same person you were 2 months ago. No, she agreed. I'm not. Is that bad? I don't think so. You seem stronger, harder, but also more yourself, if that makes sense. He hugged her suddenly, fierce and quick. Just promise you won't forget who you were. I promise. She hugged him back, holding tight. I'll never forget. I'm just adding to who I am, not erasing it. A month into their marriage, Rafael Torres requested the meeting Serena had promised. Marco wanted to go alone, but she insisted on joining him. This is my contact, she argued. I made the promise. I should be there to follow through. It could be dangerous. So is everything in your world. I thought we were partners. He'd relented, and now they sat in a private dining room at an exclusive restaurant, waiting for Rafael to arrive. Serena wore black, dress, heels, the diamond earrings Marco had given her as a 1-month anniversary gift, armor disguised as elegance. Rafael arrived exactly on time. Mid-40s, expensive suit, intelligent eyes that assessed everything in seconds. He greeted Marco with professional courtesy, then turned to Serena. Mrs. DeLuca, a pleasure to finally meet the woman who saved me from federal prosecution. I simply provided information. You made your own choice. She gestured to a chair. Please, sit. Over dinner, they negotiated. Rafael wanted access to Northern California distribution networks. Marco wanted guarantees about product quality and violence restrictions. Serena asked questions about labor practices, trafficking policies, and civilian casualties. Rafael had looked surprised. You involve your wife in business discussions? My wife is my business partner, Marco corrected smoothly. Any deal we make includes her approval. She has veto power over operations that violate our ethical standards. Ethical standards? Rafael's smile was amused. In our line of work? Especially in our line of work, Serena said. Sustainable power requires boundaries. We don't traffic people, we don't move product that kills indiscriminately, and we don't target civilians. If you can't work within those parameters, there's no deal. Rafael studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed, genuine and surprised. Marco, you've married a woman with teeth. I respect that. He raised his glass. To partnerships built on clarity and mutual benefit. They clinked glasses, and Serena felt the weight of what she'd just done. She'd negotiated with a cartel lieutenant, set terms for criminal enterprise, and she'd done it with confidence, using everything Marco had taught her about leverage and human nature. She should have been horrified. Instead, she felt powerful. The deal was struck, papers signed through intermediary lawyers, and Rafael left with a handshake and a promise to send the first shipment within the week. When they were alone, Marco turned to her. You were magnificent. He'll tell everyone he does business with about Marco DeLuca's formidable wife. That reputation will protect you. Is that why you let me negotiate? Reputation building? I let you negotiate because you earned your place at that table. He pulled her close. And because watching you wield power is the most attractive thing I've ever seen. She kissed him there in the empty dining room, tasting wine and promise, and the strange exhilaration of becoming someone she'd never imagined she could be. 2 months into their marriage, Serena realized she hadn't used the key. Hadn't even thought about it except as a reminder that she could leave if she chose. The freedom Marco had given her had made staying feel like choice instead of trap. She told him this one night, curled against him in their bed, moonlight painting patterns on the ceiling. I haven't used the key. I know. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. Why not? Because I don't want to, not yet. Maybe not ever. She tilted her head to look at him. Does that scare you? Terrifies me. His smile was rueful. Because it means I have something I could lose. Something that matters more than power or empire or survival. What's that? You. Simple. Devastating. I fell in love with your defiance and your intelligence. But I stay in love with your strength. The way you carved out space in my world and made it yours. The way you challenge me to be better than my worst impulses. He turned to face her fully. I told you once I wanted a partner. I didn't know how extraordinary that partnership could be until I watched you build it. Tears pricked her eyes. I love you too. I think I have for a while. I was just too scared to admit it. And now? Now I'm still scared, but I'm also sure. She kissed him softly. You gave me freedom, and I'm choosing to stay. That's love, isn't it? Choosing someone when you could walk away? Yes, he whispered against her mouth. That's exactly what it is. They made love slowly, tenderly, sealing promises that didn't need words. And afterward, Serena lay awake listening to her husband's heartbeat and thinking about the girl she'd been in the rose garden 8 weeks ago. That girl had been afraid, trapped, desperate. This woman was none of those things. She was powerful, strategic, dangerous in her own right. She'd married a monster and discovered he was also a man. She'd entered a criminal empire and was reshaping it into something that might actually matter. She still wore the key around her neck, but now it wasn't an escape plan. It was a reminder that she'd chosen this life with clear eyes and full knowledge, that she was Marco DeLuca's wife, not because she had no other options, but because she'd decided he was worth the risk. The choice became real 3 months into their marriage, when everything she'd built nearly came apart. It started with a phone call at 2 in the morning. Marco's encrypted line, the one that only rang for emergencies. Serena woke to him already sitting up, voice sharp with focus as he listened to whoever was on the other end. How many? Pause. No, don't engage. Pull everyone back to secondary positions. I'm on my way. He ended the call, was already moving toward the closet. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except Thomas. Fear spiked through her chest. What's happening? Federal raid. They're hitting the warehouse district and 3 of our legitimate fronts simultaneously. He pulled on clothes with efficient speed. Someone gave them detailed information about our operations. We have a leak. She threw back the covers, grabbed her robe. I'm coming with you. Serena. We're partners, remember? You don't get to lock me away every time things get dangerous. She moved to her closet, started pulling out clothes. Besides, if they're raiding legitimate businesses, you'll need someone who can talk to federal agents without sounding guilty. That's me, not you. He stared at her for 3 heartbeats. Then his expression shifted into something like pride mixed with fear. 5 minutes. Then we leave whether you're ready or not. They made it in 4. The drive downtown was tense and silent. Marco made call after call, coordinating responses, ensuring lawyers were en route, verifying that everyone knew to exercise their right to remain silent. Serena listened, absorbing the crisis management tactics, understanding for the first time how fragile their empire really was. One well-placed informant, one coordinated federal operation, and everything could collapse. They arrived at Marco's downtown office building, one of the legitimate fronts, to find federal agents swarming like ants, marked vehicles, agents and windbreakers, the organized chaos of a major operation. Thomas met them at the perimeter, face grim. They have warrants for the office, the warehouse in Oakland, and the medical supply distribution center. They're looking for evidence of prescription drug trafficking, money laundering, and racketeering. He handed Marco a folder. Our attorneys are inside. They're buying us time, but it's bad. How bad? Someone gave them our shipping manifests. Real ones, not the sanitized versions. They know about the pharmaceutical distribution, the cash flows, everything. Thomas's voice dropped. Whoever the leak is, they had access to operational details only Inner Circle would know. Marco's face went cold and hard as stone. Get me a list. Everyone who's had access to those records in the last 6 months. I want names within the hour. Already done. Thomas handed him another folder. 12 people, including me. I know it's not you, Thomas. You've been with me for 15 years, but the others, Marco's jaw tightened. We find the leak today, before they can do any more damage. Serena touched his arm. Let me talk to the agents. Both men looked at her like she'd lost her mind. You can't, Marco said flatly. Anything you say can be used against us. Against you, not us. I'm your wife, but I'm not involved in day-to-day operations. I run a charitable foundation focused on youth education. My finances are completely separate from yours. Linda Chen made sure of that. She met his eyes. I can talk to them as a concerned spouse whose husband runs legitimate businesses. Ask questions. Get a read on what they actually know versus what they're fishing for. That's dangerous. Everything we do is dangerous. She straightened her shoulders. Trust me, I know how to navigate this. Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp. Don't volunteer anything. Don't answer questions directly. And if they try to separate you or pressure you, invoke your right to counsel immediately. Understood? Understood. She walked toward the federal command post with her heart in her throat and Marco's lessons echoing in her head. Information was power. Control the narrative. Never let them see fear. The lead agent was a woman in her 40s, dark hair pulled back severely, sharp eyes that tracked Serena's approach. Her badge read Special Agent Catherine Mills. Mrs. DeLuca. Not a question. I'm surprised to see you here. My husband's business was raided in the middle of the night. Where else would I be? Serena kept her voice calm, concerned, but not defensive. Can you tell me what's happening? We'll cooperate fully, of course, but I'd like to understand the nature of the investigation. Agent Mills studied her carefully. We're executing warrants related to suspected illegal pharmaceutical distribution and money laundering. Your husband's operations have been under investigation for 8 months. That's impossible. Marco runs legitimate import businesses and medical supply distribution. Everything is properly licensed and regulated. She let confusion color her voice. If there's been some kind of mistake, there's no mistake, Mrs. DeLuca. We have detailed evidence of prescription drug trafficking disguised as legitimate medical supply distribution. Mills pulled out a tablet, showed her shipping manifests. Recognize these? Serena studied them, mind racing. These were sanitized versions, the legitimate paperwork that fronted the real operations. Someone had given the feds just enough to be suspicious without handing them actual proof of criminal activity. These look like standard medical supply shipments: insulin, pain medication, antibiotics, all legal products. She looked up at Mills. What exactly are you suggesting is illegal about shipping medicine to pharmacies and clinics? The prices, Mrs. DeLuca. These products are being sold at a fraction of wholesale cost. That's only possible if they're being acquired through illegal channels. Mills's voice was sharp. Or are you going to tell me you believe your husband is just extremely generous with his profit margins? I'm going to tell you that I run an educational foundation, not my husband's businesses. But I do know that Marco has made it his mission to make essential medications affordable for communities that can't access them through traditional healthcare systems. If that's illegal, then our healthcare system is more broken than I thought. She met Mills's eyes directly. Is providing affordable medicine really the crime you want to spend federal resources prosecuting? Something flickered in Mills's expression. Doubt, maybe, or respect. That's a nice story, Mills said. But good intentions don't excuse breaking the law. And bad laws don't excuse letting people die because they can't afford insulin. Serena's voice was quiet but firm. You're right that I don't know every detail of my husband's operations. But I know him, and I know he's never dealt in the kind of poison that's killing people by the thousands. If you're looking for fentanyl traffickers or cartel violence, you're wasting your time here. Are we? Mills leaned closer. Then explain the cash transfers to offshore accounts. The shipping containers that arrive with different contents than listed on manifests. The network of distributors who've all served time for drug-related offenses. I can't explain any of that because I don't have access to that information. But my husband employs people with criminal records because he believes in second chances. He uses offshore accounts because our banking system discriminates against businesses that serve low-income communities. And if shipping manifests don't always match contents, maybe you should ask whether the problem is with my husband's business or with an import system so complex that honest mistakes are inevitable. She was walking a razor's edge between defense and admission, but she could see Mills processing the arguments, weighing them against whatever evidence she actually had. You're very articulate, Mrs. DeLuca, very prepared. Mills's smile was thin, almost like you've been coached. I'm a Stanford graduate with a degree in international relations. I don't need coaching to understand how systems work, or fail to work. Serena held her ground. Now, are you arresting me? Or can I go be with my husband while you tear apart his businesses? Mills was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped back. You're free to go. For now. But this investigation is ongoing, Mrs. DeLuca. We'll be in touch. Serena walked away with her spine straight and her hands trembling. She'd just lied to a federal agent, obstructed justice, become complicit in ways that couldn't be undone. She found Marco in the building lobby, surrounded by lawyers coordinating damage control. When he saw her, relief flashed across his face before the mask slammed back into place. Status? He asked quietly when she reached him. They have suspicions, but not proof. Someone gave them enough to justify warrants, but not enough to make arrests. They're fishing. She kept her voice low. We need to find the leak, now. Already working on it. He turned to one of the lawyers. Get me copies of everything they're seizing. I want to know exactly what they're seeing. The next 6 hours were a masterclass in crisis management. Marco's team worked with surgical precision, ensuring nothing genuinely incriminating was accessible, verifying that everyone who'd been detained knew to invoke their rights, coordinating with lawyers to challenge the warrants on technical grounds. By noon, the federal agents were packing up, frustrated but empty-handed. But the damage was done. The raids had sent a message to everyone in Marco's network. They were vulnerable, being watched, and someone on the inside had betrayed them. Back at the glass house, Marco gathered his inner circle in the operations room. 12 people, all of whom had access to the operational details that had been leaked. Serena stood beside Marco, watching faces carefully as he explained the situation. Someone in this room gave information to federal investigators, Marco said, voice cold and controlled. I'm going to find out who. You have 2 choices. Confess now and face exile. Or wait for me to find proof and face worse. Silence. 12 faces. 12 different expressions of shock or fear or carefully controlled neutrality. Then, impossibly, someone laughed. Everyone turned to look at David Chen, one of Marco's logistics coordinators. Young, ambitious, always just a little too eager to prove himself. His laughter was bitter, resigned. You're not going to find proof, David said. I was too careful. Used encrypted channels, dead drops, anonymous tips. The feds don't even know my name. He looked at Marco with something like defiance. So I'll confess. Yes, I gave them information. No, I'm not sorry. The room erupted, voices overlapping, angry and shocked. Marco raised one hand and silence fell immediately. Why? Marco's voice was dangerously quiet. Because you're a hypocrite. David stood, facing Marco directly. You talk about ethics and boundaries, about being better than your father, but you're still a criminal, Marco. You still profit from suffering, and you dress it up in nice words about affordable medicine and second chances, but it's still illegal, still wrong. He gestured at Serena. And then you married her, this smart, beautiful woman who could have done anything with her life. And you trapped her in your world because her father made mistakes. You call it protection. I call it a cage. Serena felt Marco tense beside her, felt the violence simmering beneath his control. She put a hand on his arm, felt him vibrate with barely restrained fury. So you thought federal prosecution would fix that? She asked David, voice calm. Destroying Marco's businesses would somehow help the thousands of people who depend on affordable medication? Or was this really about your own conscience? David's eyes snapped to her. You don't understand. You're too new to this world. He's corrupted you. He gave me freedom, she interrupted. More freedom than I ever had as Harold Whitmore's perfect daughter. Marco showed me how power actually works, gave me the tools to build my own operation, and never once demanded I become something I wasn't. So don't lecture me about cages, David. I know exactly what I chose. You're defending him. David's voice was disbelieving. After everything, I'm defending my choice. She moved to stand fully beside Marco, their shoulders touching. And my partnership. You betrayed not just Marco, but everyone who depends on what we've built. The clinics, the job programs, the actual good that comes from this operation. You didn't strike a blow for justice. You just made yourself feel better about your own complicity. David's face crumpled. The defiance drained away, leaving only a young man who'd made a catastrophic mistake. I thought, I just couldn't live with myself anymore. Then you should have quit, Marco said quietly. Walked away clean. Instead, you put everyone at risk because you couldn't handle the moral complexity. That's not conscience, David. That's cowardice. He gestured to Thomas. Get him out of here. Standard exile protocol. Out of California by tomorrow, out of the country by next week. And David? Marco's voice was cold as death. If you ever speak about this operation to anyone, journalist, investigator, priest, I will find you. And exile won't be an option anymore. Clear? David nodded, tears streaming down his face. Thomas escorted him out, and the room slowly emptied until only Marco and Serena remained. Marco stood at the window, staring out at the ocean, hands clenched into fists. The control he'd maintained all day was finally cracking. Serena moved to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind. It's over, she said softly. We survived. This time. His voice was raw. But he was right, Serena. I am what he said. A criminal dressed up in ethics and good intentions, and I did trap you. Stop. She turned him to face her. You gave me a choice. Every single day you give me a choice. I could use that key right now, walk away with millions, legal protections, and a new identity. But I don't. Because I choose you. I choose this life. Stop letting other people's judgment define what we've built. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I love you. I don't say it enough, but everything I've done, everything I'm trying to build, it's better because you're in it. I love you too. She tilted her head up, kissed him gently. Now let's go upstairs and remember why we fight so hard to protect this. They made love that afternoon with desperate intensity, reaffirming everything that mattered. And afterward, lying tangled together in the sunlight streaming through the windows, Serena made a decision. I want to expand my foundation, she said, not just educational programs. I want to create legal defense funds for people caught in the system you operate in, protection for the employees, the distributors, everyone who's vulnerable because they work in your world. Marco propped himself up on one elbow, studied her carefully. That's dangerous. It connects you more deeply to the operations. I'm already connected. I just defended you to a federal agent. I helped identify our leak. I'm not standing on the sidelines anymore, Marco. So I might as well build something that actually protects people. She met his eyes. Unless you don't want me that involved? I want you as involved as you choose to be, but I need you to understand what you're taking on. This makes you a target, not just for law enforcement, but for anyone who sees you as my weakness. Then we make sure I'm not a weakness. We make me strong enough to be an asset instead. She smiled slightly. You taught me how leverage works. Time to use those lessons. His smile was fierce, proud. You're extraordinary, you know that? I'm learning. She kissed him. From the best. Over the next 6 months, Serena built something unprecedented. A legal defense fund that provided representation for low-level operatives caught in enforcement sweeps. A network of social workers who helped families navigate the aftermath of arrests. Educational programs that gave people exit strategies if they wanted to leave criminal enterprises. She did it all above board, documented everything, made it impossible to shut down without obvious political persecution. And she used Marco's network to identify the people who most needed help, who were suffering under a system that criminalized survival. The media noticed. Profiles in local papers about the young philanthropist married to a controversial businessman. Questions about where her funding came from, skepticism about her motives. She handled it all with grace and strategic honesty. Yes, my husband's businesses operate in gray areas, she told one particularly aggressive reporter. But so does every import business trying to compete with corporations that monopolize healthcare. The question isn't whether Marco is perfect. He's not. The question is whether we're going to criminalize the people trying to fill gaps our system creates, or actually fix those gaps. The interview went viral. Suddenly, Serena DeLuca was a name people knew. Not as Marco's wife, but as a force in her own right. Rafael Torres called after seeing the interview. Your wife is brilliant, he told Marco. She's making it politically difficult to prosecute you while building genuine goodwill. That strategy I didn't think was possible in our world. She's rewriting the rules, Marco agreed. I'm just trying to keep up. A year after their wedding, Marco came to Serena with a proposal. They were in the library, her reading foundation grant applications, while he reviewed expansion plans for the legitimate businesses. I want to start transitioning operations, he said without preamble. Not immediately, but over the next 5 years I want to move everything to legitimate channels. Real pharmaceutical distribution with proper licensing. Import businesses that don't require gray market channels. Healthcare clinics that take insurance and government funding. Serena looked up from her papers, shocked. That would fundamentally change everything. Your profit margins would crater. Your network would fracture. Why would you do that? Because I want to build something that lasts beyond me, beyond us. He moved to sit beside her. My father built an empire on fear. I built one on controlled ethics, but you're building something actually sustainable, something that helps people without requiring them to break laws or compromise themselves. I want to be part of that instead of constantly defending against it. Marco, this is your life's work. You can't just, I'm not abandoning it, I'm transforming it, using the capital and connections I've built to create legitimate alternatives to the broken systems we've been exploiting. He took her hand. I've been thinking about what David said, about being a hypocrite. He was wrong about you being trapped. But he was right that I'm still operating in spaces that hurt people, even when I'm trying to minimize that harm. I want to do better. This is because of what I'm building, isn't it? This is because of who you are. What you've shown me is possible. His smile was rueful. You came into my world thinking I was a monster, and I was. But you didn't just accept that or run from it. You challenged me to be better, to actually live up to the ethics I claim to have. This transition is me taking that challenge seriously. Tears burned in her eyes. It'll take years, and it'll be dangerous. People who profit from the current system won't want it to change. I know, but we've survived worse. He pulled her close. We'll do it together. Build something that actually deserves to last. She kissed him, tasting salt and promise, and the strange miracle of a man who'd started as her captor, choosing to become her true partner. The transformation began slowly. Marco started refusing contracts that violated their ethical standards, even when it cost money. He invested in licensing and regulatory compliance for the pharmaceutical distribution. He hired lawyers to navigate the legitimate healthcare system instead of working around it. Some of his old network balked. A few left entirely, unwilling to operate within legal constraints. But others, surprisingly, stayed, adapted, discovered that legitimate business could still be profitable if you were smart about it. Serena used her foundation to create job training programs that help people transition from gray market operations to licensed work. She lobbied for policy changes that would make legitimate pharmaceutical distribution more accessible. She built bridges between Marco's world and the straight world, making it easier for people to cross over. It was slow, frustrating work, but it was also hopeful in ways their previous operations had never been. Jamie graduated high school with honors and got accepted to Berkeley. He'd grown up in their household watching the careful balance between criminal empire and legitimate business, understanding both worlds without being fully part of either. Are you proud of what you've built? He asked Serena one evening, a week before he left for college. She considered the question seriously. Proud? I don't know. It's complicated. We've helped people, but we've also operated in spaces that hurt others. We're trying to do better, but we still carry the weight of what we've done. She looked at her brother. I think I'm proud of choosing to stay and try to make it better instead of running, but I'm not proud of everything that choice has required. That's honest. Jamie hugged her. Thanks for giving me a place to land when I needed it, and for showing me that people can be complicated without being evil. You're going to do better than us, she said. You get to start clean. Use that. I will, but I'll remember where I came from too, and who protected me when I needed it. 2 years into the transition, Special Agent Mills requested a meeting. Marco wanted to refuse, but Serena convinced him to agree. They met in a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, with lawyers present but silent. I'm not here to threaten you, Mills said, stirring sugar into her coffee. I'm here to acknowledge reality. We've been watching your operations for 3 years, and in the last 2, you've systematically dismantled everything we were investigating, moved to legitimate channels, proper licensing, legal distribution. We decided to evolve our business model, Marco said carefully. Focus on long-term sustainability instead of short-term profit. You decided to get smart. Mills smiled slightly. Your wife's influence, I suspect. The foundation work, the legal defense fund, the policy lobbying, it's made prosecuting you politically complicated. And now that you're actually following the law, it's also pointless. She looked at Serena. You're good at this. Building power through legitimacy instead of shadow operations. Your husband is lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other, Serena corrected. And we're lucky to be in a position where we can actually try to fix the systems instead of just working around them. Mills studied them both for a long moment. I'm closing the investigation, not because I think you're innocent of past crimes, I'm certain you're not, but because prosecuting you now would punish the thousands of people who benefit from what you're building. That's not justice. That's just bureaucratic revenge. Thank you, Marco said quietly, for understanding the difference. Don't thank me. Thank your wife. She's the reason we're having this conversation instead of me serving arrest warrants. Mills stood, dropped cash on the table for her coffee. Build something good, Mr. DeLuca. You've been given a second chance most people in your position never get. Don't waste it. After she left, Marco and Serena sat in silence for a moment. We did it, Serena finally said. We actually did it. You did it. I just followed your lead. He took her hand. I love you. For believing this was possible when I didn't. I love you for being willing to change. She smiled. For choosing partnership over control. For becoming the man I always hoped you could be. 3 years after their wedding, Serena stood on the terrace of the glass house, watching the sun set over the Pacific. The house was full of people. Friends from the foundation, employees from the legitimate businesses, Jamie home from college for the weekend. A celebration of the official launch of their newest venture, a network of affordable healthcare clinics that would serve low-income communities across Northern California. Marco found her at the railing, wrapped his arms around her from behind. Happy? She leaned back against him, considering. I think so. It's different from what I imagined 3 years ago. But it's real. We're building something that actually helps people without requiring them to compromise themselves. You're building it. I'm just providing resources. We're building it together. She turned in his arms. Partnership, remember? Always. He kissed her softly. I have something for you. He handed her a small box. Inside, a new necklace, platinum chain, no key this time. Just a simple pendant engraved with coordinates. What is this? The exact point where I first saw you at the gala, where this all started. His voice was quiet. I wanted to mark it. Remember that everything we've built came from one moment of recognition. Me seeing you and knowing my life was about to change. Tears filled her eyes. Marco, I know you don't need the key anymore. You've built your own power, your own empire. You stay because you choose to, not because you're trapped. But I wanted you to have something that marks this journey, from the rose garden where you were sold to here, where you're free and powerful and exactly where you choose to be. She kissed him, tasting salt and love and the incredible truth of what they'd created together. A partnership built on honesty and transformation, an empire that had started in shadows but was stepping into light. When they broke apart, she clasped the necklace around her neck, feeling the weight of it settle against her heart. Thank you. For everything. For the freedom to choose, the trust to build, and the courage to change. Thank you for choosing me, even when I didn't deserve it. His smile was genuine, warm, the expression of a man who'd found something more valuable than power or wealth. What do you want to do next? The clinics are launched, the foundation is thriving, we've transformed the operations. What's the next impossible thing? She looked out at the ocean, at the city lights beginning to sparkle in the gathering dark, at the life they'd built together in this glass house on the cliff. I want to write our story, not sanitized, not glamorized. The real story of how a girl sold to save her family became a woman who transformed a criminal empire into something legitimate, how a monster trying to be better found a partner who made him want to be good. That's dangerous. It exposes everything we've built, or it protects it by owning our past instead of hiding from it. She turned to face him fully. We can't erase what we've done, Marco, but we can be honest about it. Show people that transformation is possible, that you can start in darkness and choose to move toward light. He studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right, we write the story together. True and complicated and probably controversial as hell. Just like us. She grinned. Should we warn our lawyers? Definitely. He laughed, pulling her close. But first, let's enjoy this moment. This night, this life we've built. They stood together on the terrace as stars emerged overhead, and the party continued inside. Serena touched the pendant at her throat, felt the key that lived in a safe now, unnecessary, but precious. Symbols of the journey from cage to freedom, from fear to choice, from transaction to love. She'd been sold in a rose garden 3 years ago, offered as payment for her father's debts to a man who terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. She'd married that man not knowing if she'd survive the choice. But survival had been the beginning, not the end. She'd done more than survive. She'd thrived, built power of her own, challenged Marco to become better, and in doing so, discovered her own strength. Together, they'd transformed an empire built on shadows into something that could stand in daylight. It wasn't perfect. They still carried the weight of past crimes, still operated in gray areas that made idealists uncomfortable. But they were trying. Building legitimate alternatives, creating real change, using their power for more than just profit and protection. I love you, she said into the gathering night. My complicated, dangerous, surprisingly honorable husband. I love you, he answered. My brilliant, fierce, absolutely extraordinary wife. Inside, someone called for them. Jamie's voice, laughing, demanding they come celebrate properly. They went together, hand in hand, partners in every sense that mattered. In the glass house overlooking the Pacific, they had built something unprecedented. Not a fairy tale ending, but something better. A real partnership forged in fire and honesty. An empire transformed through love and stubborn determination to be better than their circumstances demanded. Serena Whitmore had disappeared 3 years ago in a rose garden, traded like currency to save her family. But Serena DeLuca had emerged from those ashes, powerful, strategic, free in ways that girl could never have imagined. She wore her choices like armor now. The decision to stay, the work to transform, the love that had started as transaction and become something irreplaceable. The future stretched before them, full of challenges and complications. But they would face it together, equals bound by more than contracts and circumstance, bound by choice, by partnership, by the fierce determination to build something worthy of the second chance they'd fought so hard to create. And in the end, that was more than survival. It was victory. Not over enemies or obstacles, but over the versions of themselves they might have become if they'd chosen fear instead of courage, control instead of partnership, shadows instead of light. They had rewritten their story, and the ending was just the beginning of something extraordinary.